This is our next lecture for Chapter 11. This will be lecture number 4. In this lecture, we'll discuss the Philippines and peninsular Southeast Asia. Of course, Philippines is our last insular island country to discuss, insular Southeast Asia, and then we'll move on to peninsular Southeast Asia. Here we see a map from your text of the Philippines from page 527. Probably the most important thing to note here is the large number of islands that make up the Philippines. These are just the largest islands we see. There are thousands, literally, of small islands as well. The island of Luzon, however, is the most economically active island, the most affluent island, with Manila, the capital, also being the most important manufacturing and industrial center. The Philippines are 7,000 islands, of course, difficult to govern due to this large number. It's an region that was early colonized by Spain, resulting in a distinctive society. It was ceded to the United States after 1898, after the Spanish-American War. American culture domination has impeded development of a national culture. The Philippines gained independence in 1946. The informal section of the economy is large, which means, of course, lower tax collection. And less tax collection results in underfunding of infrastructure, education, health, and social spending programs, especially in rural and small island areas. Remittances are an important part of the economy for the Philippines. The economy has weathered global economic shocks better than its regional peers, however, due to less exposure to international securities and lower dependence on exports. Agriculture rules much of the individual occupations within the country, and agriculture accounts for a large amount of economic activity. Agriculturally, sugarcane, coconut, rice, corn, bananas, and cassava, pineapples and mangoes are important, with pork, eggs, beef, and fish. Of course, as an island nation, fish is a very important agricultural or resource extraction product. Important industries here include electronic assembly, garment, footwear, food processing, petroleum refining, and fishing. It's a home to a large service industry for call centers, billing, and payroll operations due to the English language fluency of a well-educated middle class in the urban areas, of course. And, of course, the country also supports important United States military bases, and the military bases also have their own structure of important industries surrounding and supporting the military activity. All right, so let's move on to peninsular Southeast Asia. Here on the map we see Myanmar to the west with the Irrawaddy River. We have Thailand kind of in the center, a region that's never been colonized by another country. Laos is landlocked to the north and very incidental in terms of economic activity. Cambodia is sort of to the south, and then Vietnam, the northern part, and very thin down to the southern part is to the east. This map's on page 530 of your text. Thailand is a newly industrialized country. FDI in a wide variety of industries, most notably in automobiles. It's never a Western possession. It was renamed from Siam in 1939 and has been ruled by successive military governments and has a constitutional monarchy. The monarchy carries the moral force here. Until the late 1970s, the economy was primarily agriculture. Some benefit from association with the West as part of the Vietnam War helped bring in a small amount of certain industries related to the war, as well as food export. Thailand has become the center of Southeast Asian automobile industry. Economic growth has been restricted to the capital city and region and EMR of Bangkok. Clustering has had several environmental consequences, as we talked about early on, including flooding, the loss of globalized industry due to flooding, the number of rivers that come together in Bangkok. Of course, we talked about that a couple of lectures ago. Beginning in the early 1980s, the government of Thailand established economic policies promoting export-based manufacturing activity with both foreign and domestic investors. Since then, the manufacturing has increased. Aside from the usual bureaucracy, political stability, and inexpensive labor, Thailand offers a friendly business culture to East Asian investors in particular who share the Buddhist religion. The country was also friendly to ethnic Chinese, a factor important to Hong Kong and Taiwanese investors. Although primarily commodity exports remain important, manufacturing has become the engine of economic growth. Unlike Malaysia, Singapore, and the Philippines, where FDI in manufacturing exports is anchored in electronics, Thailand has become the center of Southeast Asia's automobile industry. Thailand is home to more than 15 corporations assembling passenger cars and over 1,800 parts suppliers. Thailand is also the world's largest exporter of pickup trucks. Japanese manufacturers arrived in 1980s. General Motors, Ford, BMW, and Porsche have all established assembly operations here. While auto consumption in Thailand has dramatically increased, 43% of vehicles produced in 2012 were exports, primarily to markets in Asia and specifically throughout Southeast Asia. Also important to Thailand's economy, of course, it has one of the best developed tourism industries in the world today. All right, let's move on to Vietnam. Vietnam is now a major target of foreign direct investment following the introduction of market-based economies in the 1980s, conquered by the Viet ethnic group from China in the 2nd century BC. The next 2,000 years were dominated culturally and politically by China. Captured by France in the mid to late 19th century, and in the 1940s, nationalist opposition forms under the leadership of a communist guerrilla known as Ho Chi Minh. And this nationalist opposition was primarily in the northern, more agricultural region of the country. The south tended to be more of the economic and manufacturing region. Vietnam War ran from 1958 to 1975, started with the French and North Vietnamese fighting and moved more into the United States being the primary Western influence. The northern part of Vietnam is traditional core of Vietnam culture. It's the incubator for communism and was closely allied to the USSR. The South was capitalistic with very strong French and U.S. influences. After the end of the war, of course, unification of the North and South under a communist government. More recently, there have been positive developments. FDI has been a vehicle for economic turnaround. The primary source of Asian is East Asian FDI, specifically has targeted garments and footwear for export. Rice production has increased with property reform starting in 1980. Now rice is a major export. Tourism is also increasing with the beaches to the east, as well as eco-adventure in the mountains to the west side of the country. In 1986, Vietnam's leaders began to loosen the strings of centrally planned economy and adapted a program of Doi Moi, or economic renovation. This policy shift entailed dismantling the opening of the country to foreign investment. Although starting at a low base, since the 1990s, Vietnam has experienced the world's highest export growth rate. Vietnam shifted from being a rice importer to the world's second largest exporter in 2010. Economic turnaround has been fueled by FDI. East Asian as well as Southeast Asian countries dominate the FDI. Aside from financing hotel construction, tourism, and oil development, FDI has specifically targeted the garment and footwear export, and more recently electronics. Vietnam's export market is primarily Asia, but with the lifting of the U.S. trade embargo in 1995, the United States has become Vietnam's most important export destination. Next, we'll talk about Cambodia. Cambodia is a slow economic rebound after a Marxist-inspired and horrifically murderous regime at the end of the 20th century. It's heavily reliant today on foreign aid. It has been more recently and even more heavily troubled than Vietnam was following the end of the Vietnam War. And in fact, part of the Vietnam War spilled over into the east part of Cambodia during that period in the 1970s. The Khmer Rouge were responsible for genocide in the killing fields, converting the government to authoritarian, communist-like government with their leader declaring a agrarian society and forcing intellectuals into the agricultural fields, killing many. The country of Vietnam invaded Cambodia in 1979, and unrest continued in this country through the 1990s. Cambodia has minimal interaction with the global economy. Its low level of FDI was invested primarily in garment manufacturing, which accounts for most of the country's export value. Approximately 90% of garment and textile factories are owned, and 3/4 are foreign owned, and 3/4 of the factory employees are female. Tourism is important to a certain degree, though, as tourists visit Angkor Wat and other historic cultural sites. Myanmar is a resource-rich country, but also one of the last isolationist military governments in the world, and that may be a thing of the past in the near future as well. It has been led by an authoritarian government with an indigenous brand of socialism. It has a well-endowed resource base with well-distributed timber, rice production in the Irrawaddy Valley. There are gems, gold, tin, and petroleum. Until November 2015, this was a reformer country that has had the most resistance in the Southeast Asian region to globalization. However, November 2015, the National League for Democracy Party won a landslide victory, ending decades of military-backed rule. And this definitely raises the question of what happens now. It's very interesting to consider, and as these changes are currently happening. Myanmar's dictatorial government has been isolationist. which is reflected by its earning the least FDI in the Southeast Asian region. At present, low value-added natural resources dominate exports, but that's liable to change with the new form of government. Well, that's it for Chapter 11. Let's discuss our summary. Many countries that comprise Southeast Asia and the experience of being colonized by so many Western powers make the region very different from South Asia and East Asia. In the immediate post-World War II period, some countries chose to open their economies to globalization, and as modernizers experienced rapid rates of economic growth with varying degrees of government management. Other countries decided to remain isolated economically based on socialist economic principles. These, of course, are the reformers. Whether modernizer or reformer, the region's physical environment has suffered as a result of rapid economic growth. In insular Southeast Asia, Singapore is the only rich and developed country. In mainland Southeast Asia, only Thailand has fully embraced globalization, and as the result of that is an upper middle class country. That's it for Chapter 11, and I'll talk to you again soon. Thanks for coming and visiting our lecture.